When I started investing in property, there was no one creating content on how to dominate in the affordable housing sector in South Africa. In fact, I was following the gurus of US. I was watching them talk about the cap rate of Ohio and how to get below market value deals in Florida. It wasn't relevant. And that's why I started this channel, because there wasn't enough focus on this underserved market where yields are strong and demand is endless. On my channel, I share everything from my failed offer to purchases, tenant drama, renovation mishaps, and the times when rejections got so real that I almost gave up. And the reason I've done this channel is to hopefully inspire, educate, and empower you to take your first or next step into that realm of financial freedom. So if you aren't already subscribed, hit that button and join the tribe. And for those of you who want to go a little bit deeper, I've got links in the description below. In this video, I'm going to share with you some of the key things I wish I knew before buying my first block of flats. And behind me, I have a building that I recently purchased called Villa Erica, 7 times 2-bedroom units. If you want to see the case study of this one, the link is in the description. The first lesson is that commercial finance sucks. You see, the building behind me is not going to attract home loan residential terms. The only way I would be able to get home loan terms on a building behind me is if this was a sectional title, i.e. the 7 units each had 1 title deed per unit. But this is a freehold, meaning there's 1 title deed for the 7 units. And when you take that to the bank's not going to offer you a 20-year home loan at prime interest rate over 20 years. That's just not the case. What they're going to do is they're going to give you a commercial loan. And commercial terms are much more expensive and difficult to manage. So if you go to an ABSA, as an example, their home loan terms would be 20 to 30 years at prime interest rate. But their commercial terms would be 5, 10, 15 years at prime plus 2 or 3%. That's going to have a massive impact on your cash flow. Now, when I bought my first ever building, I didn't know that. So I bought the building and I ran the numbers assuming I would get home loan terms. Turns out I didn't. I had to put more equity down and my cash flow suffered greatly because I didn't account for that more expensive finance cost. So if you don't know how to finance a property and you don't understand the difference between commercial and home loan, then first invest in your education and your knowledge. Make sure you understand the game before you try and play it. The second thing I wish I knew is that real wealth does not come easily or quickly. Now, there is a thing called get rich quick, and there's many ways to do it. You could rob a bank, you could buy crypto, you could gamble, you could win the lottery. There's many ways in which you could get rich quick, but it's not a sustainable way. It's not a way that's going to last. There's so many reports of people who win the lottery and 2, 3, 4 years later, they're broke because they don't have the financial literacy to manage that money. So if you're sitting on 1,000 Rand, or 100,000 Rand or 1,000,000 Rand. Learn how to manage what you have before expecting to manage more. If you can't save 10 Rand out of 100 Rand, you're not going to save 100,000 from 1,000,000. If you've got 5,000 Rand per month as disposable income, try and play within those parameters because so many people want to jump straight into having 50, 60, 70,000 Rand disposable income. And then they say, then I'll learn how to budget. Then I'll learn. No, learn with the small amounts because the truth is, real wealth comes from 10, 15, 20 years of dedicating yourself to a new hard. Get rich quick has got the flip side of getting poor quick as well. The third thing I wish I knew is that agents lie and sellers lie. There's no truth to be said by a seller or an agent. So let's just break it down. The agent works for the seller. The seller is biased. The seller wants the most profit that they can get from selling the building. The agent, because they're linked to the seller and their commission is linked to how much they can sell it for, they're biased. So asking the seller or the agent, what do you think about the market? Do you think this is an appreciating area? What do you think of the tenants? Well, they're always going to paint a very rosy picture. I have been lied to more times than I can count. And in the beginning, I took it at face value. And my first ever deal, 3 of the 6 tenants were completely in a hijack situation. Obviously, the agent didn't tell me that. They said they're perfect tenants. The water bill was 3 times higher than what I was expecting because there were leaks all over the place. But obviously, the agent told me that they had an inspector and they would give me a compliance certificate and everything was fine. And obviously, the building was not in a good area. It was not appreciating. So my first ever property that I bought was a massive liability because I trusted and listened to the seller and the agent. And the truth is, they're biased. And I'm not saying that all agents and all sellers are bad people, but you understand it's human nature. You want to feed yourself first. So if you're going to be a commission-driven person like an agent who earns more by getting a higher price, you're going to try in every way that you can to push that price up. My advice is to get evidence for everything that the agent says. So if they're saying that the tenants are paying well, then let's see a rental statement. Let's see the last 12 months worth of rental statement. Give me the arrears report. If they say that the City of Johannesburg utility bill is accurate, then get the latest statement and see if the tariffs are realistic. With this building behind me, the tariffs for what we were being charged for water and electricity were commercial rates. That means we were being charged way more than what we should have been charged because this is a residential compound. Now, I didn't do that due diligence, but now that the property is in my name and I'm seeing the statements month in and month out, I can see that we're being overbilled. And now I'm fighting with Ekurhuleni to try and bring that tariff back down to residential rates. If I had known that before buying the property, that could have been a negotiation tactic for me. That could have been some leverage to bring the seller down to a lower price. My fourth lesson, and leading on from don't listen to agents, is get your due diligence down packed. Now, due diligence has got a variety of different elements. Number one, you have to prove the income. So if this unit is being rented out for $4,500, I want to see proof of that. I want to see a signed lease agreement. I want to see the owner's bank account or bank statement that shows the $4,500 coming in, or I want to see a rental statement from a rental agent. I don't want to just see a spreadsheet or something written on a notepad that says $4,500. There has to be irrefutable proof that there is $4,500 being generated on this unit. The second thing that I want to prove is all of my expenses. So my utility expenses, things like electricity and water. Again, I want to look at the COJ or the City of Ekurhuleni statement to make sure that the tariffs are accurate. And number two, that I'm recovering that from my tenants. So if my tenants are spending 100 Rand on water, am I recovering that 100 Rand from the tenants? Because if I'm under recovering, who's at a loss? Me as the landlord. The third thing that you want due diligence on is proof of condition or an inspection of the unit. So going through the unit with a qualified inspector who's registered with the NHBRC or with some sort of contractor that has knowledge and experience. This cupboard door here is quite flimsy. This has been ripped off loose. So like, how much is that going to cost? Now, that's not a big cost element, but what if your kitchen needs new kitchen cupboards? What if your geyser is broken and needs to be replaced? What if there's damp and water issues in the unit? How much is that going to cost? If you don't understand accurately what your renovation costs or the condition of the property is, how are you going to factor that into your numbers and how are you going to work back to that accurate offer price? So again, if you don't know what you don't know, you're going to be in risk and you're going to be in a potential of loss. So due diligence is a key skill I wish I knew before I started buying blocks of flats. Leading on to my fifth piece of advice, negotiation is key, and the one who has the most power and the most leverage wins the negotiation. See, when I first went into blocks of flats, I walked into the first block that I saw. The agent told me a pretty story. I believed everything he said, and I pretty much offered asking price because I didn't know what I was doing. Over time, and now that I'm more of a savvy investor, when I'm walking through a property and the agent's with me, I will highlight every single flaw in the property. If there's a mark on the wall, I'll make sure that the agent knows about it. If there's a slight damp issues, if there's anything that is not functioning, I tell the agent about that because by the end of the viewing, I'm going to say to the agent, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, new geyser, new kitchen, this, that's 200, 300, 400,000 Rand. I can then chop that off the asking price. So the asking price is 2 million Rand. I can say to the agent, that's a fair value, but it's going to cost me 500,000 Rand to get to that level, so I can only offer 1.5. Then I'll sign the offer to purchase subject to proof of income, proof of expense, proof of condition. Once I get the proof of income and the proof of expense, I can go back to the agent. I can say, you know what, they're not recovering. Or the tenant isn't paying, the tenant's in arrears of 4,000 Rand. That's a risk to me. Now I need to chop down lower and lower and lower. You can't just go to a seller and say, you want 2 million, I'm offering you 1 million, done in claw. But you can justify it and you can say, by all of these expenses and because you're mismanaging the building, etc., this gives me a better offer. And this is why I target distressed buildings. Walking into a hijacked building or into a building that needs a lot of renovations is a lot easier for me to negotiate down because I've got all of these leverage points that can chop down the offer price. If I go into a building that's perfectly run, perfectly managed, first of all, the seller's not going to sell. You would never sell an asset. You only sell a liability, somebody that's taking money out of your pocket. Because a good deal happens when the seller is ready. but a great deal happens when the seller is desperate. My sixth lesson is that in order to be an investor, you have to know how to value something. You have to know how to value the asset, because if you don't know how to value the asset, you're not buying at a discount and then you're not gambling. Think of the stock market. If you know that a Facebook share is worth 100 Rand, but you're able to time the market and buy it when it's 80 Rand or when it's 70 Rand, you're buying at a discount, you're buying value. That is investing. That's making an informed decision. You know what the valuation is and you're able to undercut the price. And when you're valuing a company, you have to look at fundamentals, technicals, you have to look at financial performance. There's ways in which you can measure what a company is worth using price to earnings as an example. In property, you've got the same metrics. You've got internal rate of return, gross yield, net yield. Those are the ways you value the property. But if you don't know how to value an asset class, then you're in the gambling stage of investing, and you shouldn't be doing that. Rather put your money into education, get a coach, get somebody who's maybe a little bit further along the journey than you are, who can teach you these things, because otherwise you're going to learn through the hard knocks of life. You're going to pay your school fees either which way. I'd rather pay somebody up front who's knowledgeable and can help me with a shortcut than trying to do it on my own. This property behind me, as an example, is generating 35,000 Rand in monthly income. That includes the rentals as well as the parking and the garages. If you work on a 20% yield, which is pretty relevant in this area, you're working at about a 2 to 2.1 million Rand valuation. So we knew that the valuation was 2.1 million. We then minused our transfer fees, minus the renovation cost, and minus a little bit of equity because we wanted to buy at a discount to grow our wealth. That's how we came up with a max valuation of 1.6 million, and that's where we closed this deal at. But we couldn't have even started the negotiation if we didn't know what that max value was. So the key golden rule of being an investor, whether it's in property, stocks, Bitcoin, wherever it may be, you have to understand how to value the asset class, because then you can work back to find the right discount to buy that equity to grow your wealth. My seventh and final thing that I wish I knew before buying a block of flats is that it's not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be the hardest thing that you ever do. You know, people see me on YouTube and they see the lifestyle that I live now, where I don't necessarily have to worry about money, and then I don't have to watch every penny, and they think, yeah, it was easy, and now you live such an easy life. But they don't see all the steps that I had to take to get there. You know, I've had to do evictions, I've had to go through hijacked buildings, I've had to deal with council, I've had sleepless nights, I've got so much debt that I'm nearly drowning in debt. Now, luckily it's good debt because I'm using it to buy income generating assets, but if my tenants don't pay, I'm the one who has to fund that debt. You know, if I go back to the COVID days, when COVID hit, around 40% of my income washed up because a lot of my tenants lost their job. So I was earning, let's say 100 Rand per month. Now I was earning 60 Rand per month. I lost 40% of my revenue overnight. And the thing is, the bank didn't give me a payment holiday. It's not like the bank said, it's fine, we know that your tenants aren't paying, we'll give you a payment holiday. No, I still had to fund my debt. I still had to pay the city of Ekurhuleni and the city of Johannesburg. I still had to pay water, electricity, all of these things. It got so bad that I actually had to go back into corporate full time. So I'd left corporate, was doing my property thing full time. Things were going well, COVID hit, and I had to go back to corporate. I had to go and work in IT because my property business wasn't making enough money to wash its own face, and I had to step in and finance that. So for about a year or two, I was living at the breadline. I was basically living in a very small one-bedroom apartment. I was struggling to get by. My girlfriend, my wife now, but my girlfriend then had to support me financially, which was, you know, as a man, that's a hard experience to be in. And for a year or two during those COVID windows, I made no profit. In fact, I was using my salary to try and keep this thing afloat. And there was no real sign. When COVID hit, there was no sign that things were going to recover. You know, there was part of me that was thinking, should I sell? Should I try and exit? Should I try and, you know, but that's not the stuff you see on the Instagram highlight reel. You know, you see all these gurus, you see all these people living this great lifestyle, but you don't see the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the toughness of this business. And I can tell you now that this blocks of flats affordable housing market has got incredible yield. I wouldn't be creating content and doing as many deals as I do if it wasn't worthwhile, but it's not risk-free and it doesn't come without its troubles. Dealing with evictions, doing maintenance, having to evict a good family, just because the father lost their job. It's that's an emotionally hard thing to go through. Doing evictions of a hijacked building, walking through properties and seeing how bad some people have to live. Now, I'm not trying to say this to discourage you. I'm trying to be the realist to tell you that anything worth doing is going to come with its challenges. And you have to be able to step up. You have to be ready for that. The upside is easy, right? The upside is always great. Be financially free. Everybody's like, oh, I'll do that. But what about the steps to get there? Everybody wants the six-pack. But not everybody wants to eat the healthy salads, hit the gym, get a personal trainer, stop drinking. People don't want to do necessarily the hard stuff. They just want the glory at the end. And the truth is, if you want financial freedom, it's going to be a 10 to 15-year play where you live below your means, you sacrifice, you have sleepless nights, you do the hard stuff, you do the sit-ups, and that's when you end up with the six-pack. And if I could go back to 10, 15 years ago, I don't know if I would do this again, to be honest. I think I'd rather rob a bank or do crypto or something like that. But I'm glad I stuck it out, and I hope that whatever your choice of investing is, whether it's crypto or Bitcoin, crypto or Bitcoin is the same thing, or whatever your asset class is. I'm not saying property is the only way or the best way. It's just the way that I've found to work. There's many other ways to make money. Commit to a long-term hard where you will sacrifice now for a better tomorrow. And that is the final piece of advice that I hope you can walk away with in this video. You might see me now financially free, running a portfolio and helping others do the same, but what you don't see is the 10 to 15 years of hard graft, sacrifices, lessons learned, mistakes made that I did to get to this point. Now, if you want to shortcut that, if you don't want to go through the 10 to 15 years to reach this point, consider subscribing to my channel, go through my membership content. And if you're really serious and you want to get some in-depth knowledge, go check out some of my short courses. I've got end-to-end courses for single lets, multi-lets, blocks of flats, student housing, as well as how you can dominate at auction. And I'll show you everything from finding an area, analyzing a deal, signing an offer to purchase with the right suspensive conditions, how to raise bank and private finance, and even to do creative no money down deals. I'll teach you the right structure to invest in, how to do management, and also what power team members you need to dominate in this game. So if you want to know more and take your knowledge to the next level, click the links below and enjoy. Until next time. Happy investing.